Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I'm your host Matthew Pejkovic and this is episode number 246. Today's show is dedicated to the career of one of the biggest movie stars in the world, Mr. Sylvester Stallone. From Rocky to Rambo and many great films in between, Sylvester Stallone has inspired and entertained a legion of movie fans while drawing billions at the worldwide box office. With Rambo Last Blood releasing in theaters today, I thought it would be a great time to look back at the career of a man whose films have inspired generations. And who better to talk about all things Stallone than director, writer, actor, and the man behind the Arrow in the Head website, Mr. John Fallon. John, I thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
It's my pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me.
So before we get into all things Stallone, I just want to touch on some things that's happening with you lately. I saw on your Twitter that you are actually going to be a part of the Cameo Network. Can you explain exactly what that is?
The Cameo Network is basically, they approached me and asked me if I wanted to be on it. I checked it out. And it's basically celebrities are there. And like Snoop Dogg is on it, Corey Feldman and stuff like that. And for a certain price, people get celebrities to record like a video message for the fans. So let's say Stallone was on it and you love Stallone. So I would order it, I would pay for it. Stallone would videotape himself, saying, "Hey Matt, how you doing? Happy birthday," blah blah blah, and stuff like that. So I've never done anything like that before. They approached me. I figured, why not give it a shot, see what happens.
That is excellent. I mean, it's such a really cool way these days to try to be in touch with people from around the world. I mean, I remember back in the day of writing letters to my favorite actors and such, and sometimes you get a response, sometimes you don't. This way, it's a really great kind of direct way to talk to people. I also wanted to talk about, just a little of a brief moment, about a movie that you're working on right now, which is very interesting to me. I've been seeing a lot of posts about it, and that's the film Heretic. You're directing the film. How are things going with that movie? When are we expecting any news in regards to release dates, etc.?
Well, right now, getting a film off the ground outside of the studio system is what I like to call a battle, an epic battle. So we came, I'm surrounded by a very good team. I'm very confident in my producers, and we've basically building this year, and we were 1 inch away from pulling the trigger and entering official pre-production. But something happened at the finish line, and the deck of cards crumbled, as they say. So, but we've dusted ourselves off, we've regrouped, and then we're back at it. So right now it's looking like we're going to enter production next April.
That is excellent, because from what I've seen so far in regards to story ideas and tweets that you put out there, it seems like it's the whole thing in regards to the Knights Templar and all that stuff is so interesting. I've listened to a podcast recently that dispels the myths, talks about the realities of this situation. It makes for such great movie fodder, so I'm really interested to see what you guys do with it.
Definitely. I mean, I have other projects that I'm attached to, like No Man's Ridge with Eric Red, which is also slated to shoot next year, which I'm producing and I'm also acting in. And I'm developing something a little smaller on the side. I call it my surprise project, so I'll keep that for when I'm ready to say surprise. But in terms of Heretic, it is my passion project. It's like I'll kill myself to get it off the ground. So, and I get my cake and eat it too with it. That's the beauty about that project. It has action, but it's also drama, and it has something to say, and it's somewhat of a dissection of faith. Not just Christian Catholic faith, but all faith. So you'll see.
A person who back in his days was himself a actor outside of the studio system, struggling to get there, was Mr. Sylvester Stallone, who in 1976 changed the world with Rocky. And he's an actor that I think, outside of like other people in that era, he was almost kind of like a motivational speaker in a way he presented his films.
Definitely.
And I know that you said to me outside of our podcast in chats that we had that he was a guy that really inspired your career. Likewise with me, man. I think, like, if people ask me who my favorite actor is, I'll say Pacino. If people say who my favorite director is, I'll say Scorsese. But if you're going to ask me who was the guy that really got me not only into movies but into boxing, into fitness, all that kind of stuff, it's Stallone. And I distinctly remember the first impressions of movies in general were his movies. Rocky 2, that final fight scene between him and Apollo Creed. First Blood. I think First Blood was the first film I saw, not the whole film, but a certain segment. That's the chase scene where he's on that motorbike and he's going through the streets and he's heading up towards the mountain range with the cops chasing him. I mean, that was... Yeah. Still to this day, burned in my memory. Those are my first impressions, and I fell in love with not only the characters that he made, but that was kind of like the segue into movies in general. And that's what made me what I'm doing today. And so many facets of my life revolve around those first impressions of films, and it has to do with Stallone. What about yourself, John? What was the first time, whether it be in cinema, whether it be on TV, because, you know, you and I grew up during the VHS generation, so a lot of our Stallone consumption came from that. What was the first time that you saw Stallone on the screen?
It was Rocky, the original Rocky on television, and after that, if memory serves me right, it was First Blood on Beta. Beta? It was Beta.
Yes.
Yep. And the first time I saw a Sylvester Stallone movie on the big screen, it was Rocky 4. It could have been Rocky 3, but my dad couldn't find parking. And he lost his temper, and he said, we're going back home. And I remember I was crushed. But, Rocky 4 was the first stuff I saw on the big screen.
You know, the funny thing about Stallone's films is that all of these movies... the majority of them, I'll say 90% of them, my first viewings was on VHS or DVD. I did not see a Stallone film on the big screen until I think it was Rocky Balboa in 2006.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and that was a really big thing to me because it kind of struck me just as I was going to watch it. It was like, oh my God, you know, this guy is one of my favorite movie stars, if not my favorite movie stars of all time. This is going to be the first time I'm going to watch his movie on the big screen, and it was almost kind of like a spiritual kind of almost moment for me. Going from that to his latest film, Rambo: Last Blood, I saw that last week.
You saw it?
I've seen it.
Oh.
I've written my review of it. It's going to go up later today. There's an worldwide embargo, so it won't be for another few hours or so. I am giving it a positive review. In my opinion, it's the strongest Rambo film since the first movie.
Wow.
And the reason I say that, and I'm going to talk about it now because by the time this podcast comes up, the embargo's passed, so I'm free to talk about my reactions to it. The reason why I say that is because, to me, the character of John Rambo, when people think of him, they think of this muscle-bound kind of guy just laying waste to battalions of enemy soldiers in front of him. To me, when I think of Rambo, I think of that scene at the end of First Blood where Stallone, he breaks down and he just talks about all the grievances that he has, the sadness, almost like mourning that he has. And to me, when I think about that film, First Blood, to me, it's almost like the perfect action drama. It has those elements of great action filmmaking, but it's not necessarily an action film per se. There are action scenes, but there's the dramatic elements that really make it, and that's something that kind of shines in the latest film as well. Of course, you got your really bloody violence, and Last Blood is bloody, and it's really just, it puts to shame some of the other kind of movies that have been released lately that have like that one-man kind of warrior machine guys. He reclaims that throne. In your opinion, John, First Blood, do you think it is the perfect action drama? And did that end Monologue? Do you think that's perhaps Stallone's finest dramatic moment he's captured on film so far?
Well, it's funny because that end Monologue, I actually, I went to acting school for 3 years. That was part of my education. And everybody would have to choose a monologue, and everybody chose Shakespeare or Tennessee Williams, and I chose First Blood. Nothing is over, nothing. Just don't turn it off. Wasn't my war. You asked me. I didn't ask you. And the teachers were like kind of blown away that I would choose that. In terms of your particular question, I don't know, Stallone. Stallone is. Well, I think he gets the respect now. He gets the respect that he's always deserved as an actor. With his Golden Globe nomination, and we all know he should have won that Oscar. But back then he didn't. He was always considered more like an action guy, and every time he tried to get out of the action thing, people would kind of like lambast him to some degree. Is it his best moment? The end monologue of First Blood? It's one of them, in my opinion. But, you have Rocky, you have Copland, you have even Lockup.
Yep.
It's like Rocky 3, when Mickey dies.
Yes.
That scene rips me to pieces every time I see it. Even as a grown man, I break down, Mick, it's like, whoa. It's one of them. How about that? Sorry, I'm kind of like dancing all over the place now. It's one of them, definitely, but I can't say with 100% that it's the best one.
Rocky 3 that scene in Rocky 3 is really interesting because Rocky 3 came out the same year as First Blood, and it really does feel like that as a movie star and also as an actor, he seemed to be really on top of his game. But the Rocky movies, in my opinion, so we got the 6 original films and then we got the 2 kind of spin-offs, etc. Those movies, to me, really kind of personify who Stallone is, not only as a actor. You got the drama, you got the action, you got all these kind of things, but also what he is as a creator. He's a director, he's a writer as well. I think out of the 6 movies, he directed like 4 of them. He wrote all of them. But now I think it's time for you and I to really rank those first 6 Rocky movies. We're going to try to give it a definitive rank here. And I have a feeling that you and I might be very similar in how we place things. So, John, how about you go first? How would you rank those first 6 Rocky films?
Okay. It would be Rocky, the original, Rocky 3. Rocky Balboa. This was I was kind of torn about this next choice. Rocky 4. Then Rocky 2, then Rocky 5.
Okay.
That's what I came up with.
So you and I are a little different here. So I have...
Good.
Okay, so I have Rocky, original Rocky, and I think everyone agrees that original Rocky is the best one in the series.
Yeah.
My second choice is actually Rocky 2. There is some nostalgia attached to that. That was the first Rocky movie that I saw, one of the first Stallone films that I saw as well. My third choice is actually Rocky Balboa. And I'll get to why in a little later. And then I go 4, 3, and then 5. So you and I both agree on the placement of 1 down to 6. I think where we kind of differ is where 3 and 2 are placed. And I'm not saying I don't like 3. I love 3. I think 3 is just a fantastic film. But 2 to me... And it might be a bit controversial here because I know a lot of people love the fight scene in Rocky 4 and so do I. But to me, 2 has the best fight scene. That Apollo Creed, Sylvester Stallone rematch at the end, when compared to where number 1 had its thing. I mean, number 1 was a really low budget film. You have actors in there that are really green. I think at the time, Burgess Meredith and Burt Young, they were the veterans of that film. But Stallone was really green as a movie star. As an action person. Number 2, what he brought as a director in regards to fight choreography, the use of slow motion, which a lot of people, when they did use it at the time, didn't really bring the really kind of dramatic heft to it that he did. That was something that really kind of just floored me. And at that 10 count at the end, with both Rocky and Apollo Creed are trying to get up those ropes, and then Rocky finally wins it, and then he does the Adrian, I did it at the end. To me, that was almost the most satisfying moment in that whole franchise. But what about yourself, John? When we talk about number 3, which you placed at the second place in your ranking, what was about number 3 that really moved you? I know you talked about the Mickey scene. What else about that film really kind of struck a chord with you?
I think number 3 is the best middle. You see, there are two types, from my perspective, two types of Rocky films. There's the grounded Rocky movies, like the original Rocky and Rocky 2, and Rocky Balboa. And then there's the more commercial, cheesy, like Rocky 4. Actually, Rocky 4 is pretty much the only one. And Rocky 5 was an attempt at the grounded, but it was just a misfire all around.
Yep.
Rocky 3, though, is a perfect mix for me of the heart and the character depth of the first two, but the kind of montagey music, Eye of the Tiger, clip pace feel of Rocky 4. So part 2, Stallone basically followed kind of like the same template as the director, Avildsen, his template in terms as a director, but part 3 is all Stallone. You feel that it's him as a director, it's him behind the lens, and he has a way to communicate chain of events that I personally really like. And so, yeah, I love part 3 because it's half, a heartfelt character study and half a very entertaining, commercial film, mainstream film.
I think the thing that part 3 that a lot of people remember as well is it ushered in Eye of the Tiger in pop culture lore. Interesting trivia in regards to that. Did you know that the original song that Stallone wanted for that movie was Another One Bites the Dust by Queen? Can you imagine how different that would be if that song wasn't, like Eye of the Tiger wasn't a part of that movie? I think it would change the whole kind of feel of that film if that thumping bass line and Freddie Mercury's vocals was just like at the opening of that monologue where Rocky has his 10 or 11 title defenses in that excellent montage there.
Yeah, with the magazines and his rise to fame, and which was pretty much a parallel to Stallone's own rise to fame at the time. Yeah, I don't see Another One Bites the Dust there at all. And everything happens for a reason, and thank God, because Eye of the Tiger is a song that still gets me want to lift some weights or punch the bag when I hear it every single freaking time.
Absolutely, that and No Easy Way Out from Rocky 4. Those are my two.
Oh yeah,
my two favorite Rocky kind of pop culture rocking songs from that movie. Recently, Sylvester Stallone had an interview. I believe it was with Variety, just talking about his career. No doubt in the lead up to the release of Last Blood, he shared news that kind of shocked a lot of people, and that was that he doesn't own a stake in the Rocky franchise. And I think a lot of people assume that him being the creator of that character, the man, who, without him, that film doesn't do anything, right? I mean, Stallone is Rocky, but he doesn't own ownership of it. And when thinking of it, you got to think back to 1975, 76, when the movie was made. He was no one, and I no doubt he would have signed off on a lot of things. How shocked were you, though, that when you heard that Stallone didn't own a piece of the Rocky franchise?
Not at all. Actually, I wasn't shocked at all because for the reason that you said. Stallone was nobody at the time, and the studio wanted a star. They wanted James Caan and stuff like that, guys like that, and he held off. And finally, they let Stallone make the film, but for a much lower budget that they initially wanted to make it for. So I wasn't surprised at all that he just, sign whatever would get it going, and he needed to get the film off the ground, and he needed to be able to showcase his stuff on the screen to be able to move his career further. And obviously, as we all know, it paid off. He got Oscar nominated and won Oscars for the screenplay, if I remember correctly. So no, I wasn't surprised in terms of, I know how this business is, and I wasn't surprised at all.
The Creed films are the spin-off from the Rocky movies, and I think that if there was any type of way you could do something with a franchise as storied as that and make it fresh and make it exciting again, that was the way to do it. Stallone, of course, received an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor for that first Creed movie. He won the Golden Globe. He was an odds-on Oscar favorite to win it. I think a lot of people were anticipating Stallone to win. I myself I was gonna jump up for joy when he did it, and then he lost to Mark Rylance for his work in Bridge of Spies. Bridge of Spies is a great film. Mike Rylance did a great performance, but I mean, that was in my like Oscars history has like a long lineage of injustices. You know exactly how Pacino never won an award for the Godfather films. Who knows? But these things happen.
Yeah.
I think when people look back now, you know, if that moment was there, Stallone's for the taking. I think a lot of people look to, though, the Golden Globe speech that Stallone gave, in which I think a lot of people had a problem with not enough credit being given to Ryan Coogler, who was the writer and director of the film, and also to Michael B. Jordan. People took it as a slight against him. I think Stallone was just overwhelmed by the fact that this creation of his has been resurrected and he was winning awards for it. What did you think, John? Did you think the Golden Globe speech cost Stallone the Oscar?
Well, you know, in terms of how our society has been, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we're such a bunch of, well, yeah, the world as we know it, I don't agree with it. I don't recognize it. We're a bunch of pansies, a bunch of crybabies, and I wouldn't be surprised that Stallone forgot to mention a couple of people, and which, by the way, I'm sure you remember, he actually went on Twitter after and thanked Michael B. Jordan and thanked Ryan. But I wouldn't be surprised that would do it. Yeah, sadly. But he deserved it, and they should have given it. It was a perfect opportunity, to do right by Stallone, and they should have had it, in my opinion, of course.
I think so too. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, even before he went on social media to congratulate Michael B. Jordan and Ryan Coogler, he did it in the post-Golden Globes press conference scrum. He was like, oh my God, I forgot to mention these people, and he did it straight away. I think you are absolutely right in kind of like in the sort of environment and conditions that a lot of people in the entertainment industry and politics, etc. We live in a time right now where one little mistake, one little faux pas, one little error, whether it be from 5 minutes ago to 20 years ago, can cost a person their career, can cost a person, much deserved plaudits, much deserved whatever. And I think it's a really kind of curious time we are living in, a really kind of sad one as well. And in regards to Stallone, I mean, it's interesting thing about him is that, though, he's always the guy that kind of bounced back. His career and his personal life very much reflect his work. I mean, Rocky Balboa is the cinematic kind of like reflection of Stallone as a whole. And I think something that really reflects that is the Rocky Balboa film. I mean, you got to think about it. From Copland up to that movie, he wasn't having a good run at all. Almost a decade of misfires and blockbuster duds, and at the end there, he was going straight to video, and that was before going video on demand and streaming was a cool thing. Being straight to video back then was not a good thing whatsoever. He was doing his own reality show in The Contender. First season was excellent, by the way. I always love that show. But Rocky Balboa put him back on the map, and I think a lot of people were kind of cynical about it. He was pushing maybe 65, maybe a little older at the time. But there was a moment in the film that I think won everyone over, and that was the monologue, where it's him, Rocky, talking to his son, played by Milo Valentina. I think his name was Valentina, I think it is. I'll just drawing a blank there, but he was excellently cast as Rocky's son. And it was a monologue that I think inspired like 1,000 memes and videos in regards to inspiration and such. And if for anyone who don't know what it is, I really recommend you look it up. He talks about, getting hit in the face by life, but you keep moving forward. I mean, if you began, you talked about this First Blood monologue, John, and you used that as your kind of thing for drama school. If you started drama school now, I'd imagine you would have used the monologue from Rocky Balboa as your reinforcement. Definitely. I mean, that monologue is basically
just everything about Stallone, but said overtly. I mean, like for me as a kid, why I gravitated towards Stallone, and a lot of people like yourself, and a lot of people gravitated towards Stallone. I personally didn't have a present father figure. So Stallone was, for me, this is what being a man is all about. And his whole philosophy that he's put in the mostly in the Rocky movies, his philosophy of life is you give it everything you got. You know, nobody's going to give it to you. Sorry, I just swore.
No, you can swear. You can swear.
That was my, all right, cool. Over the top was my motto of life. The world meets nobody halfway. If you want something in life, you got to go get it. I have been running off that saying since I was a teenager. I've even said it, I have stepchildren. I've even said it to my stepchildren. This is how life works. You know, I'm using over-the-top quotes. But that one in Rocky Balboa, it's the Stallone philosophy of life put in words for all of us to hear, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
It's interesting you talked about Stallone as kind of like a surrogate kind of a father figure or an inspirational kind of a figure. My dad, me and my father and I are close as you can be. For you got to understand, my dad, born 1945, came to Australia in 1969. He's a very old school kind of guy. You know, he's TVs, pop culture. There wasn't really his thing. He was a guy that came to Australia. He worked his ass off. He made, you know, a success of himself so he can provide for his family. Very kind of traditional migrant story. He didn't really have time for the movies. He had time for Stallone movies though, and that was the film. Those were the films, the Rocky films, the Rambo films, Over the Top, Cobra. Those are the films that where I watched with him. The only time he ever went to the cinema was to watch the Rocky films. He was the guy that stood up in the middle of the Rocky 4 fight and was shadow boxing. Badly, I might add, but shadow boxing. Because of the emotion. And I think a lot of people kind of, especially from like, say, like European background, like my father comes from Croatia, not far from Italy. We're right next door to where Stallone's, Stallone's family no doubt would have came from. So there was that kind of aesthetic there, but it's also just about the whole hard work concept that he brought to his characters. And that monologue in particular, it just kind of drives people. I mean, I listen to that monologue now and again. It's just such a perfectly worded and delivered kind of thing. We're going back to Stallone, the dramatic actor, just how he delivers it, raises his voice at the same time. You know, a lot of people give Stallone crap for his cadence, his voice. I mean, a lot of people don't know that was actually from a mishap when he was born. The doctor used forceps and actually pinched the nerve. Exactly, and pinched the nerve in his face. So he can't handle that. But his handle of the English language and himself as a writer, I think, is just really kind of inspiring stuff. The way he puts things together. I think another thing that's kind of, when we talk about Stallone, the dramatic actor, they really kind of he really made his mark with was a film called Copland, came out in 1997, directed by James Mangold, and I think outside of Rocky and First Blood, it's his best dramatic performance. And you know, at that time, the early 90s was good for Stallone, but when it hit the mid to late 90s, I think guys like Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis and other people were kind of definitely taking over the mantle. So he went back to drama and he put on all this weight. He became really pudgy. But he stood toe-to-toe with Robert De Niro and Harvey Keitel and Robert Liotta and a lot of other great actors, veterans and newcomers, and really, really kind of showed what he can bring as a dramatic actor. I mean, did you think at that time that he really had something to prove in? And do we want to see more drama Stallone? I know he does his action films again now. He's reprising his characters of old. There's talk about Cobra coming back, maybe something to do with Tango and Cash again, whether he's going to star in it, I don't know. But I miss Stallone, the dramatic actor. I want to see more kind of Copland style stuff. What about you, John? Do you want to see more of that from him as well?
Definitely. And, you know, in a way, Stallone has always tried to show that yes, I remember initially early on in his career, and because yes, he's paralyzed on the left side of his face, and he played Rocky, who's kind of what's the word, a bit dense. People, he had an image. It's like, oh, Stallone, he's one of those, doesn't basically he wasn't very smart, which is a complete opposite of reality. Stallone is an incredibly intelligent human being, and just because his voice sounds that way at the time, people were judging him that way. And I think throughout his career, he has tried to prove to the establishment that yes, I'm more than Rocky, and I'm more than an action guy. I can act. Even his attempts at the comedy, Stop My Mom Will Shoot, was garbage. I'll agree to that. But Oscar was genius, and in my opinion, of course, and his comic timing was genius. And I thought it was a fantastic picture I saw on the big screen, but of course, it tanked, and he had to go back to what he wanted to do. Copland, he should have been nominated.
Yeah.
But if I remember correctly, it's more than talent. It's bullshit. It's industry stuff. Copland, Miramax didn't want to put in the money to kind of advertise a nomination for Stallone, if I remember correctly. So that's why he didn't get one. And the movie didn't perform very well, if I remember correctly. So, but what I like what Stallone's been doing since his resurgence is that, like even Rambo 5, you saw Rambo 5, I haven't seen it yet. But I'm pretty sure that not only is it a very solid action picture, but he gives a fantastic performance and gives himself and the character acting moments that you wouldn't have seen in Rambo 2, for example. Am I correct?
That is correct. I think what a lot of people are going to find really surprising about the latest Rambo movie is that the first 35 to 40 minutes, you don't see a kill. You don't see any bloodshed whatsoever. It's establishing a relationship between the Rambo character and a surrogate daughter that he has, who's a teenager. And the relationship between them two is the heart of the movie. And kind of like similar to the Taken movie, something happens to her, and that triggers the beast inside Rambo. During this time, he's popping pills. He's trying to keep that beast inside. He's trying to live a life of domesticity on his ranch in Bowie, Arizona. And when the deluge of violence finally hits, it hits hard. And the reason it hits hard is kind of like, if I could compare it, sometimes I was talking to a filmmaker a couple of days ago in regards to comparing filmmaking to music composition. Sometimes you have to hit the right notes. And if I was going to compare Rambo to a genre, it would be kind of like traditional heavy metal, where you have those melodic parts, kind of like a song. Maybe I don't know if you're familiar with the music of Metallica whatsoever.
Of course, yes.
So if you have a song like Fade to Black or One or Sanitarium, you have those beginning parts of acoustic or clear guitar, great melody. But when the distortion hits and those power chords come in, those thrashy moments come in, it hits you even harder because of the juxtaposition between the two. But those hard parts aren't hard without those quiet parts beforehand. And Stallone, I think, is really good at providing those quiet parts, not only as a filmmaker. He didn't direct Rambo Last Blood. Was directed by Adrian Grunberg. He did a really great job with a movie called Get the Gringo, which he did with Mel Gibson back, I think it was 2010. Yeah. And they do a really good job in establishing the dramatic aspects, what I call the stakes, the emotional stakes needed to make the film work. So when those hard parts hit, they have a really good effect. Not to mention that they're kind of very innovative and just ferocious in their execution as well. So yes, he definitely does do that. And I love what Stallone does as a dramatic actor, but of course we all know him as an action guy as well. And he kind of resurrected a lot of careers when he did the Expendables back in 2010. For people who don't know, that was where he kind of brought back all of his buddies. Dolph Lundgren, Mickey Rourke. You also had Jet Li and Jason Statham. Jason Statham represented the young guard. even like peculiar choices like Terry Crews and Randy Couture and a lot of people like that. And the Expendables showed Stallone's talent to put forward a franchise. He tried it before with Cobra, didn't work. Some other films didn't work as well, but this film went 3 movies in. In my opinion, the first movie was the best. I think a little too many times it relied too much on novelty as opposed to good filmmaking. What about you, John? When it came to the 3 Expendables films, what did you think? Did Stallone succeed in these movies, or did they miss the mark?
Well, first of all, much like yourself, the first film is my favorite, but the director's cut.
Okay.
Stallone director's cut. Which have you seen it?
I haven't. No. I've only seen the theatrical cut.
Yeah, no, you should check it out because it's a much more mature film. So more almost like Dirty Dozen, less cheeky. More serious, more grounded, and obviously also more violent than the version we had theatrically. So I mean, I love the theatrical version. It's a lot of fun. The director's cut, I thought, was more the Expendables that I wanted to see. Part 2, I thought, was heaps of fun. And Part 3, yeah, totally lost me because Part 3, other than the PG-13 and the bad CGI, kind of forgot why people are loving these movies. It's not to see Ronda Rousey and a bunch of MMA fighters that I didn't even know, or Kellen Lutz, I think his name is, from Twilight.
Yes.
No, it's to see Stallone. It's to see all the old, that's the whole novelty of this franchise, is you're putting all the old action guys into one film. So Part 3 kind of dropped the ball in that, where there was too much. Well, first, the new people they brought in I didn't find interesting, and second of all, they spent too much time on them as opposed to Stallone and company. So I think, Stallone pulled it off to some degree, but I'm happy to hear that there's a Part 4 on the horizon, just to kind of make it right, because for me, Part 3, and even though I own it and I watched the R-rated cut of it, it's just not good. I just don't like it. I hate that movie.
I think the problem with the third one in particular is that he tried to cater to a demographic that wasn't his in the first place. I think
exactly
at that time the superhero, especially the MCU, was firmly had its grip. PG-13 was the thing that drew in a wide range of audience, but I think what that first Expendables film did was, not only did it bring back the action stars a lot of people grew up with, which in a lot of ways Stallone had an effect on their careers. I mean, there is no Dolph Lundgren without him being cast in Rocky IV, for example.
Definitely.
But it also had a grit to it that the other films didn't have, and it also had something which I thought was lacking in both 2 and 3, which is that I think 2 and 3 way too many times kind of like skimped over its action scenes. The action scenes of Part 1, there's a great fight scene, for example, between Stallone and Steve Austin, which lasts quite a while. Stallone's action scenes, his filmography, especially when you talk about the Rocky films, because Rocky's always a character that went the distance. I think it's only Rocky 3 where the fights didn't last longer than like 3 or 4 rounds. Everything else was 12-round slugfests. These prolonged action scenes where a lot of drama was happening. The action scenes themselves, and a great action scene itself should tell a story. It's a physical story. It's kind of like dance. It's kind of like that kind of thing. That's how it should come across. And 2 and 3, I think, skimped over it. It was disappointing for me, especially, to finally be able to see Sylvester Stallone go up against Jean-Claude Van Damme, or in the third film, Mel Gibson, and have the actions, those fight scenes be so short and lacking, and just not what I was hoping whatsoever. And I think that's what really kind of bummed me out in regards to 2 and 3. But Part 1, I'll defend Part 1 until until the end of days, because I think like Stallone directed that film as well, and I think when he is on board as a director, especially of action films, I know he's had some some flubs in the past as a director, but in regards to action filmmaking, he's got such a good eye for it, and he puts everything into it. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned before there's a part 4. How certain is that? Is that something that he's definitely working on?
It sounds pretty certain, actually.
Okay.
Sounds pretty certain.
Do we know of any casting as yet? There's always been rumours maybe of a Nicolas Cage, etc. I mean, if you could get a few guys in there that you haven't seen yet, who would you put in an Expendables Part 4?
John Fallon. John Fallon as the guy at McDonald's behind the counter or something. No, in all seriousness, they pretty much put everybody that... I'd love to see Matthias Hughes, who was in No Retreat, No Surrender, Part 2, I Come in Peace, the bad guy, or Dark Angel, I think it was released in some territories, plays the bad alien.
Yep.
I'd love to see him in there because he's just a fantastic gentleman, just a really good person, and I know him personally, and I think he deserves to be there. Michael Paré as well, whom I worked with on The Shelter. Balboa Young has passed on.
Yeah. Maybe someone like a just kind of spitballing here would have had Scott Adkins in there, like a Michael Jai White or something would be really cool. Maybe kind of like more maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
Or maybe like go outside of purview. Maybe have like have it set maybe in Asia. Have like some pick guys from the Raid, for example. There's so many ways those films can go, which I think Stallone tried to get them there. For some reason or another, didn't work. I mean, that cast of number 3. I remember. I don't remember if you remember the scenes from the Cannes Film Festival that year. He had the whole cast on the red carpet. It was a photo shoot. I mean, you forget Wesley Snipes was in that film as well. I mean, he can bring together such great cast. So if he does do a number 4, I just only hope that the action filmmaking can really represent the cast that is on the screen. Because if there's anything that kind of disappointed me in Stallone's career, it's the sequels to the Expendables film. Let's
well, like I said, I love Part 2. I just thought it was really enjoyable, even though yes, the final fight with Van Damme could have been more. But I still think that he could bring it back. Get your I don't know, Sigourney Weaver in there. Why not? Or Kurt Russell. Peter Wellers.
Yes. That's some interesting names right there. I mean, Kurt Russell, of course, he worked with before. And I have a feeling that you and I might be talking about a little Tango Cash now, because we're going to finish off this podcast now with... We're going to put together... Like, a question I gave to you beforehand is that I wanted to put together a Stallone retrospective, but the catch is it cannot include a film from either the Rocky or the Rambo franchises. We're going to go outside of those two franchises because it's really easy to do a retrospective on Stallone and throw a bunch of Rambo and Rocky in there. It's an easy thing to do. We're going to go deep dive here. We're going to choose some films. Let's go. We're going to choose 5 films each. Let's compare and contrast and put together the ultimate Stallone retrospective. So how about you, John? You go first. What are the 5 films that you chose and why did you choose them?
Definitely Cobra. Cobra is one of my favorite movies, period. It blows the mind that it never became a franchise. I know it didn't tank at the box office. It actually made good money. But for some reason, there was never. I know it got bad reviews, but there was never a sequel. So Cobra, definitely, it is the 80s on film. All the beautiful macho bullshit and then the score and the soundtrack and Angel of the City and Cobra for should have been a franchise last time I say it. Lock Up because it's another one of those half just entertaining action drama, but also at the same time, it's a good performance piece for Mr. Stallone. I always enjoyed that picture. The great score, too. Tango and Cash, which you mentioned, which is a great buddy movie, great action comedy. Cliffhanger, which is a movie that just gets better and better as time goes by. I watched it, actually, I went and climbed a mountain with a friend of mine last winter, and when we got back and we were exhausted, let's just watch the banger. And it's definitely aged very well. It's a much better movie than I remembered it was. And last but certainly not least, Over the Top. A movie that is half the champ with Ricky Schroeder, and the other half is arm wrestling. So I know that it didn't get very good reviews when it was initially released, and but for me, it always worked. How Stallone managed to make a film about a father and son and being estranged, and at the same time set it within the world of arm wrestling, which I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty much the only movie I've ever seen set in the world of arm wrestling, and it worked as a whole. Toss in some Kenny Loggins, and you're in business. That's the way I go.
So my 5 films do differ from yours. We're some similarities, but I'm we're going to be on a different track here, and I'm going to go here. I'm going to start off with like deep in the Stallone filmography. I'm going to start with Nighthawks.
Okay, great film. Love that picture.
A bearded, spectacled, almost Welcome Back Mr. Kotter vibe. Sylvester Stallone. It's almost kind of like a buddy kind of comedy. It's him and Billy D. Williams, but Stallone definitely is the star of the film. Going face to face with the late great Rutger Hauer. He plays a terrorist, and Stallone is kind of like a detective who takes it upon himself to try to stop Rutger Hauer's character from blowing up New York City. The next film we're going to agree, Cobra. Marion Cobretti. I think outside of the Rocky and Rambo franchises, this one definitely had the potential, at least, to do something. I think it was just a thing of it had to be something that could only work in the 80s. I don't think you could ever see a Cobra movie work in the 90s. I think a lot of things about that time, especially kind of like the whole thing in regards to that whole biker gang cult kind of thing that I had there, that was something that really suited the 80s more than any other decade. What do you think, by the way, of the news that Stallone said that he's thinking about resurrecting Cobra as a sort of maybe like a long-form TV series, maybe something for streaming? Robert Rodriguez was a name that was attached to it. What do you think of that?
Well, I have mixed feelings. I mean, I know it's going to be a TV series, and Rodriguez is actually in charge. I'm getting the impression that Stallone is not going to play Cobra. So, yeah, I'm not sure how they're going to pull it off, unless they pull they make a comedy out of it to a certain degree, like 21 Jump Street. Because what's appealing about Cobra is, for me anyways, the nostalgic elements, there's just music and the fashion and the sunglasses and the matchstick in his mouth, the one-liners, the machismo. These are all things that you can't really transpose today, in my opinion, without going the comedic route. So, which I really hope they don't do. So I have no idea how they're going to pull it off, unless they just do a TV show about a cop who's on, the zombie squad, and he wears sunglasses and he's cool. Yeah. I mean,
do you think it could be a possibility maybe they make it like set in the 80s? I mean, that would kind of like take care of all of the kind of like the style elements and music elements, set it in the 80s. Don't reference the original movie, make it like a whole new story. Maybe recast the film with an actor like John Bernthal, for example, was so great in The Punisher and other films like that. Definitely. I can see a guy like that really taking on a role. Maybe he doesn't want to do a role like that, like The Punisher and Cobra. There's a lot of kind of similarities there in sort of stuff. But I think it could have the possibility to be like really good. I mean, it's so tricky though. I mean, to pull a film like that that's very distinct for its era and distinct for, Stallone's movies are very much embedded with who he is as an actor as well. And he's such a unique personality, unique look. So that's going to be an interesting one there. My third film in my Stallone retrospective, you and I are going to agree on Lock Up. I think that movie is so good. A lot of people kind of to this day kind of like don't mention it enough in regards to fine Stallone kind of like dramas or action dramas. Such a great slimy bad guy in Donald Sutherland, and I mean you had Sonny London in there as well, who people remember from Predator.
There's more too.
Yeah, the best of the best. I mean, so many great guys. I mean, of course, you just mentioned Tom Sizemore. I think this was like Tom Sizemore's really his breakthrough kind of role here. He's kind of like almost like a Ratso Rizzo kind of guy, like a weasel. So excellent. I mean, that movie. I mean, that's a kind of film. Stallone's really good at kind of like evoking emotions in you of frustration and anger, because a lot of these characters, especially the character in that film, is really pushed to the limits of how far he's willing to go to kind of protect himself and the people that he loves. So that would be my third choice. My fourth choice, you chose Cliffhanger from 1993. I'm going to go with the other movie from 1993. That's Demolition Man. And that's a really interesting film. To me, it was almost like Stallone's answer to what Schwarzenegger was doing at the time, with a lot of kind of futuristic kind of stuff. But he has a really good dig. I mean, the Schwarzenegger-Stallone rivalry is something that I think will make for a really good biopic in around 10 years from now. There's a really good dig in Demolition Man where Sylvester Stallone's character of John Spartan, which is just an excellent character name, by the way. He is driving around this futuristic version of Los Angeles with Sandra Bullock in one of her first kind of big breakthrough performances. And she mentioned something about the Arnold Schwarzenegger Presidential Library, at which point Stallone rolls his eyes going, oh my God, what the hell has happened to America? But I thought it was just such a funny kind of funny line and dig as well. And not too far from the truth. I mean, if Schwarzenegger wasn't a migrant who came from Austria, there's very much a chance he could run. I mean, he was a governor of California for, I think, 2 terms, was it, John? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think so. It was, yeah.
So there's a possibility. There's always that possibility. So I'm going to go with Demolition Man. Also, a great villainous performance by Wesley Snipes, and he's just. I mean, Stallone's got a lot of good. Like as an action hero, he needs his villains, and Wesley Snipes is Simon Phoenix is one of them. And my final one, we're going to go back to Copland. Stallone's role as Freddie Heflin. One of my outside of Rocky and Rambo. My favourite Stallone dramatic performance. So how about you and I now? We're going to nail down the 5 films. So we got Cobra, we got Lock Up. Definitely. I'm gonna take off my choice of Nighthawks, and I'm gonna go with Cliffhanger, because that's a I think one thing that Stallone does well is he plays the role of the reluctant hero a lot of times. Yeah. Kind of like the guy who doesn't want to fight, but he's chosen to fight. In that movie, it's definitely like one of those films. I mean, you saw... I don't know if you saw... I saw Cliffhanger like on a movie screen, on a TV screen, like VHS. Did you see it in the cinema, or did you see it on a VHS?
I saw it in the cinemas. Yeah, I saw it. After... Rocky 4, I pretty much went to see every Sylvester Stallone movie on the big screen. I saw Lock Up on the big screen. I saw Over the Top on the big screen, Cliffhanger. I didn't see Cobra because I don't remember why. Your question was?
But when you saw that movie on the big screen and that opening sequence happens where Stallone is dangling on that line and he's holding that woman in his hands and his glove slowly grips. What was the feeling like? I mean, how thick was the tension during that scene? Because me watching it on VHS at that time at home, like I could barely stomach it because it was just so thrilling. In the cinemas, what was that like?
It was exactly as you would imagine. I mean, it's a very intense scene. Even when I watched it last winter, I know what's going to happen. I know she's going to slip and fall. But you're still on the edge of your seat, kind of hoping that she won't. So, on the big screen, definitely edge of your seat. There's no other way to say it. It's a very powerful scene. It's probably actually the scene in the film that I remember the most. Really, that you say cliffhanger, that's the scene that pops in my head.
Yeah, definitely. And parodied really well by Jim Carrey in Ace Ventura Part 2 as well, by the way. If anyone has ever seen that, it's pretty fun as well. So let's go through. So we got Cobra, we got Cliffhanger. What was the other one we said? Lockup. So we got 3 right there. Would you give me Demolition Man on that?
Okay, so Demolition Man. So I got Over the Top and Tango and Cash. I'll give you. I'll give you. Go ahead.
I'll put in Tango and Cash for sure.
I don't want to remove Over the Top. Can't do it. But no, fine. Sure, you could remove Over the Top with Demolition Man. How about that?
So how about retrospective? Stallone retrospective. You're in say I don't know Montreal. You see Stallone retrospective, and they have Cobra, Lockup, Cliffhanger, Demolition Man, and Tango and Cash. How quick are you handing over cash to sit for a good solid 10, 11 hours to watch all those films back to back?
That sounds like a night of the movies if I've ever heard of one. Really. These are actually all... Tango and Cash has been on my rewatch list. Cobra, I know by heart at this point. I know every frame. I know every beat of that film. Lockup 2, I wouldn't mind rewatching. So basically, his 2 prison movies, Tango and Cash, and Lockup. Although there's also Victory.
Victory, yeah. See, that's another one as well. I was kind of contemplating whether to put that on the list. I wasn't sure whether to do it, but I think what we kind of really wanted to establish with that was that he is the guy who's known for Rocky and Rambo, but there's other things there as well. And I think that's just what makes him not only such a popular movie star over the years, one of the biggest movie stars of all time for sure, but there's a versatility, I think, to his work that a lot of people just don't see. And I really hope that the conversation that you and I had in regards to Sylvester Stallone's career and his influence, really kind of brought that across. That was definitely my intention. And John Fallon, I thank you very much for joining me in this look back of the career of a actor and a filmmaker who not only influenced our lives clearly, as we talked about at the beginning of our podcast, but a lot of people as well. I doubt very much that many people will be in boxing gyms or in gyms in general these days if it wasn't for the movies that Stallone put forth. And look, once again, I got to thank you again. I can't wait to see what your reaction is to Last Blood. I'll eagerly anticipate. Are you gonna watch that soon?
Yeah, actually, much like yourself, my dad doesn't go to the movie theaters. He's an older gentleman now. But when I showed him the trailer to The Last Blood, he's like, "We're going. We're going to see it on the big screen." So it's going to be a father-son. I can't remember last time I saw a movie with my dad. So it's going to be a father-son night, hopefully over this weekend. But if not, early next week.
Excellent. I'll have my review up in a few hours. And the police podcast I'm going to have up later tonight, my time. So as soon as it's up, I'll be sure to send you links, etc., John. And look, once again, thank you very much. We talked about some of the stuff you have upcoming at the start of the podcast. Let's end the podcast now. Where can people find you online so they can follow your work?
So you can find me at john-fallon.com, which is my official blog, and also the blog for my production company, Bruise Productions. I'm also on Twitter, which is John H. Fallon. Instagram, John_H_Fallon. And good old Facebook, which is, give me a second because I don't remember, Fallon Johnny on Facebook. So, yeah, I invite everybody listening. Come and follow me as I explore the wondrous world of the film industry.
And I recommend everyone check out John's work, both as a filmmaker and as a critic and as an industry professional as well. John, you've been doing such a good job lately, and I really love the way that you've been branching out into filmmaking as well. Shelter was one of my favorite films when released that year, and whenever people actually ask, what happened to Michael Paré, for example, I always say, hey, check out Shelter. It's such a great film, and it was really good that we can talk again on the podcast. Last time you and I spoke, the first time we spoke was for Shelter, so it's really cool we can get together now and talk about all things Stallone, because like we said, if it wasn't for Stallone, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. So John Fallon, I thank you again very much for your time today, and hopefully we can talk again, and I'm really look forward to see what's happening with Heretic, and was it No Man's Bridge was the other film as well?
That's right, No Man's Bridge, yes.
And so I'm really looking forward. I love the concept art for both films so far, and what you've been posting in regards to progress for both films. So congratulations to you on that, and once again, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Have yourself a great evening.